Hello, Year 9. Welcome to Lesson 4 in your unit about God and Revelation and whether or not God is real and stuff like that. Today we're going to be talking about religious experiences and to what extent are they good evidence for belief in God. Some people believe that they have experienced God in some way, and your job really in this lesson is to get to the bottom of what you think about that. How good is the evidence? And we're going to be looking at some different ways in which people say that they've experienced God, and let's pretty much get to it. So I'm going to share the screen with you and show you something quickly. So this is what you should see when you click once you've clicked into the link. You'll see that the lesson mainly is the PowerPoint that we're going to look at in a minute. But there are also these two video clips out of the film Forrest Gump. You should be able to play those because I converted them into MP4. So hopefully that works. And then this is the sheet that you might need. It doesn't matter if you can print it off or not. Don't worry too much about that. But that's the main thing. So and now just want to share this screen with you, because once you've opened up the PowerPoint, this is the first activity. And all it says is that over the next few minutes, a variety of images are going to come up on the screen, and on your sheet or on a bit of paper, write down the first thing that you see. There may be more than one answer. So firstly, just get a piece of paper and write the numbers 1 to 8. I think there are 8 of these. And as soon as each one comes up, just spend few seconds really, just writing down the first thing that you see. And then afterwards, we'll talk about each one. So, but just write down what you see first. Here's number 1. So just jot down a couple of words. What can you see in that picture? Here's number 2. Number 3. Number 4. Obviously, if you want to look at some in more detail, just pause it. I'm not going to know. I don't mind being paused, waiting for you. I forgot what number we're up to. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, this is number 5. Number 6. Number 7. And finally, number 8. Okay, so the reason why we looked at those images is that the learning objectives for today's lesson are that you can define a religious experience, and then you're going to compare and contrast some different religious experiences and then speculate on whether they're from God or whether they just exist within our own minds, and what difference does that make in terms of how they affect people's lives. So before we move on, just go back through these quickly. I'll just point out a couple of things to you. So think about what you've got written for each thing. Here, look, I don't know if you can see my little mouse pointer, but on this one, you've got either people say that they see an archway with 2 people standing in it and sunlight shining through. but some people see that this is a man's head with his nose, moustache and mouth, and that's his ear. So it's sort of two things make two different ways of seeing it. Also in this one, don't know if anybody noticed, but there's lots of different faces. Look, top right, one face. Up here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 or so faces. And some people talk about whether this is a dog lying in the street or the man's hand on his shoulder. So, yeah, what's happening here then? Well, really, it's that the human brain always looks out for things that are familiar. I think we've kind of evolved that way to look out for predators and stuff like that. We recognize patterns, but sometimes an image creates two equally plausible patterns in our imagination, in our mind's eye, I suppose. So that's where some people can look at the same thing and see different things. This one again is an example where there are two main ways to see this. And you can either see it as an elderly lady, in which case you might see that this is her eye, this is her other eye. She's looking down. That's her nose. That's her mouth. That's her chin. And she's got like one of those headscarf things on, and that's her hair. But other people also sometimes see, alternatively, a younger woman who's looking that way. Look, that's her cheek, that's her nose, that's her eyelash, that's her ear, and she's looking that way, and that's her hair still, and that's her jawline there. And she's wearing one of those choker things that is that would, in the alternate image, is the elderly lady's mouth. So again, two images, two interpretations are both equally compatible. And sometimes people can make their mind look at it and think, I'm going to see the old lady now. Now I'm going to make my mind see the young lady. And it all depends on how you look at it. Some people can't see one or the other, and they can see one and they go, but I can't see the other one. And sometimes when I've done this lesson in the past, I've spent ages at the board going, look, that's her cheek, that's her nose, that's her eyelash. And people are going, I still can't see it. But usually, eventually, all the kids start just going, look, just look. And everyone can sort of see it by the end, which is interesting because their brain is the same brain, but you have to sort of teach it to see things in a different way sometimes. This one's quite a bit easier, really. It's just a guy playing a saxophone or some sort of instrument like that, or what looks like it might be a female face looking out at you. This is either a vase, if you favour the white colour, or if you favour the black colour, it is two people's facing each other, with symmetrical faces. This is a strange one because it's a person's face, but it also, if you tilt your head, says the word liar. And it's interesting how some people think in pictures, but I think I remember reading somewhere that some people think in words. So in my head, if I think of a car, I picture a car. But I think some people, when they think of a car, they think of the word car, which opens up all sorts of other questions, like what if they learn it in a different language or something like that. Interesting. Anyway, this one is a strange one. There's two animals really. One is like a Dalmatian dog. That's its nose on the floor, its ear, leg, and it's kind of looking that way. But sometimes if you now make your mind see this creature looking a different way, that's its eye, like a sort of wolf hyena type creature. That's its eye. Oh, it's gone now. That's its mouth, and its legs are sort of here. Its front legs are here and here, and its back legs are here and here. That one seems harder to see for me, to be honest, but I'm not sure how you see it. This is one, again, where you look at the image your brain knows that the image is staying still, but it also looks like it's moving at certain times in waves. Yeah, the image to me, it sometimes looks moving, but I also know it's still. It's a strange one. Again, it's conflicting. Like, my reasoning mind tells me this is a PowerPoint slide, it's a picture, and it's not moving. But your brain also tells you it is moving. And this one does my head in, because when I look at one of the white dots on the corners, all the other white dots have a black dot inside them. But then when I look at any of the other white dots, that one then is white and all the others have a black dot inside them. But it doesn't matter which one you look at, as soon as you change your gaze from one to the other, you can't, you know, those black dots aren't in the other ones really, but again, the corner of your eye just fills it in like that, and I don't know why. I haven't bothered to find out really. But what does this tell us, and why is it relevant to religious experience? Well, hopefully you've sort of guessed by now that these are all examples where people are looking at the same thing, but they're interpreting it in different ways. So people's brains do that. We even though we're seeing the same thing, our brains make up a reality that we sort of, through which we see the world, and it's not the same for everybody. So in terms of experiencing God, then this is relevant, because when people claim that they've experienced God, we need to, as philosophers of religion, think to what extent we are going to believe that, and to what extent should we say that, yeah, people have experienced God. On the face of it, it kind of makes sense. You think, right, well, you know, this remote control, I experience it through touch, through sight, and through hearing. I can hear it makes a sound, I can feel it, therefore I know it exists. But to what extent do people say, well, I've seen God, or I've felt the presence of God, or I've understood that God has been at work in the world? You know, do we give that the same level of credit? Some philosophers say we should, because if someone came in and said, oh, it's raining outside, you wouldn't go, prove it, prove it. You would give them credit that what they've seen and what they've experienced is real. But for some reason, we sometimes don't do that with spiritual things. Why don't we think of them as being real in the same way that we give credit to other people's testimonies about everyday things? And some people would argue the other side and say it's because it's purely because not everyone experiences things in the same way that we need to question when people have had them. So it's time for you to do a quick thing. As you've guessed by now, the lesson is about experiencing God. And when people claim to have experienced God, what kind of things happen to them which make them think that this is the case? In what kind of ways do people experience God? Pause this video, write down some suggestions. See you in a minute. And if you've just unpaused it because you're struggling and you need some more ideas, I will now give you some clues. Here are some pictures to give you some clues. Even if you've written down all loads of answers, there might be some extra ideas in there that help you to explain some more. So go and amend your work and build on what you've done. And if you've just paused it and come back, now we'll go through some answers. So here are some suggestions of things that you could have put down. Some people have visions and dreams, spiritual dreams or messages from God. Some people feel that they've been healed or they've got better quicker than they expected to, and they believe that God had some sort of hand in that. Some people have a sense of inner peace and love, or sense of God's presence. Some people feel very in awe of nature, and they feel that they're quite small in compared to the massive, amazing universe. Some people even die and then come back to life and say that they've learned some sort of truth from that experience. So they're all very interesting religious experiences, and that's just a cheesy slide that I've put in, because again it goes back to the idea that some people see the world differently to others, and it depends on what level you define what a miracle or what God is, to say whether or not you've experienced it. So now what we're going to do, well, you're going to watch a clip from the film Forrest Gump. So what you need to do is, firstly, while the clip is playing, the clip's in 2 parts, by the way, it's just the way it downloaded off the video. And while it is playing, list down the different ways in which Forrest Gump and Lieutenant Dan might be experiencing God in the scenes. Try and write down at least 3 examples of how they experience God. So now you need to pause the video, go into the files and watch those 2 clips. See you in a second. And now that you've watched them and just come back, if you're struggling for ideas, again, look, here are 4 pictures to help you and to give you some more ideas. So if you hadn't already written down 3 or 4, these 4 images here might help you. So pause again and see if you can correct your work and amend it and make it even better. And now we'll go through some answers. So firstly, they experienced God in worship and answered prayer. So some people, when they go to church, they sing together, they pray together, they feel the presence of God. And some people think that that then helps them in their life, because they've sort of got that spirit of God with them. It's definitely a massive coincidence that their boat was the only one that survived. So lots of people will interpret that in their situation as God having helped them out. Again, like in the images at the start of the lesson, it depends on how you see the world. Some people would look at that and just go, oh yeah, we just got lucky, our boat was the only one that survived. So they might interpret it in a completely non-religious way and put it in terms of luck or just the fact that stuff happens in a certain way. Whereas other people who have experiences like that say, there's no way that's luck, it's got to mean something. It's significant that we were the only one that survived. And just before it happened, we'd prayed to God to sort something out for us, give us more shrimps, and this is what had to happen. This was God's answer. So again, it depends on how you see the world. Lieutenant Dan had a sense of peace with God at the very end of the clip. Again, some people say that that's how they can sort of feel in touch with some sort of divine spirit. And again, the force of nature, when the big storm was happening and Lieutenant Dan was on the boat shouting at God saying, you cannot sink this ship. He was sort of being quite defiant, I suppose, towards God, but he was definitely felt that God was behind the storm and that it was some sort of, punishment for having been faithless in the past. So yeah, those are the ways in which they experienced God in the clip. So now pause this slide or pause this video and see if you can answer these 3 questions on some paper, and pause it now and come back in a minute to discuss what you have written. Okay, so again, question 1, is there any way to prove that God was the cause of the events in the film? No, I don't think there is, but again, I think it depends on how you see the world, and it obviously Forrest Gump by the end felt that it was that God was somehow looking out for them. Again, it depends also what you see God as. Some people see God as a personal force that looks down on them and is interacting with them in the world, but others see God as more of an abstract kind of concept that helps them to be as good as they can be or understand the world in a certain way. So in some ways, you might say some people believe that God causes events by actually sort of somehow reaching into the universe and making things happen, whereas others believe that God causes events by being the ultimate first cause of the world and knowing how it would all turn out. And so some people disagree about whether God performs miracles and interacts in the world in that way. If people say they've experienced God, should you believe them? That's a really good question, number 2. Again, haven't got an answer for that one. I always set questions that I haven't got a clue what the answer is. That's because I like it. I like thinking about stuff like that. Would you believe him? It's a good question to ask yourself is, imagine the person who you trusted most in the world one day took you aside and said, look, God has spoken to me, or this thing I saw was a miracle. Would you trust that person if they said it to you, or would you doubt everybody? That gives you a good way of thinking about it, because if a stranger on telly says they've seen God, you might say, yeah, I don't believe you. But, that stranger on telly has got a good friend somewhere who presumably trusts them. I wonder if that person believes the person off the TV. I don't know. Anyway, number 3, in the late 60s, Alistair Hardy set up, I think he was a member, I think it was Oxford University or something that he was involved in. He set up a research centre, and he built up an archive of people's experiences. Would that be good evidence of God? Is it possible to document scientifically different people's experiences and draw conclusions from it? I don't know. That sort of comes back round to question number 1, if you think about it, because that talks about whether it's possible to prove God exists from these kinds of experiences. Anyway, the next task is for you to open up the other document in the OneDrive folder, and you'll see here 9 quite famous experiences of some sort of divinity. Interestingly, number 2 about the Siddhartha's one, that Buddhists don't tend not to believe in a form God, but still an interesting one to put in there. Is it possible to understand some sort of reality from experience in the world? Anyway, just put numbers 1 to 9 on a bit of paper somewhere, and you can see how, like I've done here as an example on this one, see what you think a theist would say about each one, and then try and jot down what an atheist would say about it, and see if you can contrast the different viewpoints, and do that for each of them, and then try and build up a picture about what you think about them. So, for example, the top left one, Moses in the Bible, is reported to have encountered God through a burning bush. So if I were a theist, I'd say, well, yeah, this is a remarkable event. It had purpose. It led to the Exodus. It led to people being freed from the Pharaoh. And God, being all powerful, could easily make this kind of thing happen. So it's not, too much of a problem of belief to think that could happen. But now imagine that you're an atheist and you don't believe in this God thing at all. So you'd say, well, trees don't normally be on fire without burning up. So you might doubt that this experience happened at all. Or if you do believe that the tree was on fire and didn't burn up, you might look for some other explanation. You might say that, well, it was just the acidity of the tree, or I don't know, some other scientific explanation that you could come up with. Or you might doubt it completely and say that the experience was just in the head of Moses. He saw something that day that wasn't actually real. And then that might give you an idea to write something back in the theist box, because you might say, well, just because even if it did happen just in the mind of Moses, maybe that's how God communicates with people. So, try and have a little bit of a discussion. The more high level philosophers among you will probably be able to come up with lots of points on different sides for each one. So that's going to take you quite a while. So good luck with that. Pause the video, see what you come up with. And the final task now at the end of this lesson is to look at these following experiences and again, weigh them up from both sides. As a philosopher of religion, you've been thinking about to what extent you should believe religious experiences. Do you think people have come into contact with God or not? Because there is definitely, even though we'll never really prove the right answer scientifically, there is a right or wrong answer ultimately, because either people aren't having these experiences and every person who says they've seen God is just making it up. They're literally lying. I find that really hard to believe, because I don't think that many people would just make up these experiences for a laugh or, just to fool everybody. So I'd probably dismiss that outcome. So to me, there's only two others really. One is that they have the experiences, but they are something else. There's some other way to explain them. Or they have the experiences and it is actually God that they are experiencing. So for each one of these following types of experience, again, go and find someone in your household, go and speak to them and say, hey, if this happened, would you say that it's evidence for experience of God, or is it not? Can you think of some other explanation? So first one are visions and dreams of God telling you to do something. Would that make you think that you'd experienced God if God came to you in a dream? Lots of people dismiss their dreams, whereas other people might think that that's a reasonable way for a deity or an all-powerful creator to communicate with people. Some people say that in your dreams you do sort of gain some sort of insights into reality, but maybe that's just your brain, processing stuff while you're asleep. Nobody really knows how dreams correlate to reality. All I know is mine are pretty crazy sometimes. Anyway, number 2, seeing a man who cannot walk then rise from a chair and begin to run. A wheelchair, that is, should have said, made it clearer. But again, that you might say that something like that might be scientifically impossible. So if you saw it, would it be an experience of a healing or something like that? Or would you think it was just some other explanation? Number 3, having a sense of inner peace and love. Again, some people feel that helps them to tap into some sort of divine creator that might exist. So either they're experiencing something else, or maybe they have some sort of ability to see something that other people can't see. I don't know to what extent we can actually perceive the world around us. I know our brains create a model of the universe, but I don't know to what extent, I don't know how accurate they are. All I know is that lots of people can see the same thing happening, the same event, and then be questioned on it seconds later and say lots of different things. So, their mind has experienced factual, objective things, but in different ways to other people. So, we all perceive reality differently. It's tricky. Sensing God's spirit when walking into a church. Again, that's quite similar to number 3, really. I should have made that different one. But number 5, recognizing that the world seems to have been designed by God. So again, that's experiencing God sort of indirectly. Later on, next lesson, when we learn about revelation, you'll see that there are 2 kind of ways that people have God revealed to them. One is that they figure out about God by looking at the universe and working upwards, Whereas what we've been learning about today is more special revelation, God coming down to give experiences to people. But anyway. And finally, if you people claim that they have had near-death experiences and come back and gain some sort of insight from that. So again, what do you make of that? Have a chat with the people around you. Do you know anyone who's had a near-death experience? They might not want to talk about it, so don't keep hassling them. Did you definitely die? Yeah, they might be might not want to discuss it, but on the other hand, they might have amazing insights from that kind of thing. But the key thing to keep your mind on is whether you believe it is experiencing evidence that there might be some sort of God in the universe. What's the last bit? Especially, oh yeah. So I suppose the last little bit is just to think about your own experiences and think, do you ever get that feeling of awe and wonder if you look at the stars or a sunset or something? Do you feel that there could be some evidence of some sort of underlying spirit, or do you look at objects purely as objects and don't wonder about the connection sort of between them all or where they all came from? Again, everybody's brain is different, so it's an interesting thing to discuss. I think people should do it more. I think people should be more willing to accept that the way they see the world isn't the only way that you can see the world. People should talk about these things more, perhaps, and try and get out of themselves and out of their own perspective. So have a go at doing that. And other than that, I think that's pretty much the end of this lesson. Well done. I hope you've understand religious experiences a bit more, having pondered them quite deeply today. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks' time, where we're going to talk about different types of revelations. So yeah, have a good couple of weeks, and I'll see you soon. Bye.